Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. So you've brought us this really fascinating account of one specific intense moment. It's from a congressional hearing.
That's right, focused on federal housing reform. And it zooms right in on this exchange between Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and Vice President J.D. Vance.
And what's interesting about the source material, as you pointed out, is it's not just, words on a page.
Not at all. It gives you the vibe, the body language, how people reacted in the room.
Right. The energy.
Yeah.
And even what happened right after the viral clip, social media, the news, like a complete snapshot.
Exactly. A political moment captured.
So our mission here, for you listening, is to really pull out the key stuff from this showdown. It's more than just the policy details, isn't it?
Definitely. It's about the dynamics, how arguments are made under pressure, how information or maybe the lack of it gets used, and, maybe what it tells us about tackling these huge issues like poverty and housing.
Understanding the strategies, the emotion, the data, all colliding right there.
Yeah, getting past the headlines to see what was really going on.
And the source really sets up this core tension, this clash. You've got this, raw emotional approach.
Right, hitting hard on personal experience.
And then crashing into this very data-heavy strategic counter. And apparently, it got people talking. A lot.
Oh, yeah, it became a moment. So the scene itself, imagine the hearing room. Lights, cameras.
That buzz turning silent.
Exactly, you could sort of feel the tension ratcheting up.
And then you have Congresswoman Crockett, the description's quite vivid, leaning in, sharp eyes.
Shoulders squared, voice determined. Like a gladiator, the source says.
Yeah, it sounds like she felt really confident, like she had the upper hand going in.
Mm-hmm. And across from her, Vance. Composed, apparently. Hair neat, tie a bit loose.
But exuding confidence, too, just different. Watching her like a chess player.
Yeah, like he anticipated her strategy. Came prepared not just with data, but a plan for how to use it. There's even this little detail about his mouth twitching slightly, like he knew what was coming.
So you can see right away, this wasn't just going to be a dry policy debate.
No, it felt like a power struggle, a fight for the narrative, right there.
And Crockett takes the mic. Voice starting low, sharp, then rising.
Yes. And her main point, basically, failed policies are driving my people, her constituents, into despair. Very direct.
And she aims it right at Vance, using his title, Vice President, almost like a weapon.
Like a dagger. Yeah, that's how the source puts it. Accusing him of voting against housing bills, siding with the privileged, turning his back on Dallas.
And her evidence, it's mostly personal stories, right? Like Maria.
Exactly. Maria, working 2 jobs, can't afford rent, son doing homework by flashlight, powerful stuff.
And she paints this broader picture, too. Families crammed in, mold, leaky roofs, kids on sidewalks.
Very visceral details, trying to make you feel the human cost.
And she connects it all back to administration policies, blaming harsh immigration policies, favoritism toward the elite.
And then that direct challenge to Vance. Have you even seen this? Have you been to South Dallas? Or do you just see numbers?
It's a strong stance. Not here to play political games, but for people like Maria, the voiceless. And the audience initially reacts.
Yeah, some murmuring, nodding. You can see how that would connect.
But the source also flags something here. A potential weakness.
Right. Astute observers noticed, powerful stories, absolutely, but not much hard data connecting Vance's specific actions to those outcomes she's describing. It was anecdote-driven.
Okay, so the emotional case is made.
Yeah.
How does Vance respond? He just sits there while she's talking.
Motionless, apparently, hands clasped, head tilted slightly, watching her. Like a scientist, the source says. Eyes never left her.
And then his turn comes. The contrast is immediate.
Very. Calm, piercing gaze, polite smile. Lets the silence hang for a second after clearing his throat. Commands attention.
And he starts by acknowledging her points, validating the emotion.
Yes, acknowledging the passion. The Maria story says it touches the heart, reminds us it's real lives. Gives her that.
But then comes the pivot.
The pivot. Gentle words, but sharp, as the source describes it. But if we stop at stories, we'll never fix the roofs you mentioned. Boom. Shifts it immediately.
From emotion to outcomes. And he brings out his own evidence.
Numbers. Holds up a paper, making it visual. Says, the people deserve the truth, not just emotion.
What kind of numbers?
Specifics from a federal report. Billions received by Dallas housing programs over a decade.
Okay.
Yet homelessness up 22% in 5 years. Eviction rates among the highest.
So his core question becomes,
If the money is the solution, why isn't it working? Why are the results going the wrong way?
and his interpretation.
Just throwing money isn't the answer if the programs aren't managed well. People need actual solutions, not just funding announcements.
Then he uses his own story about Ohio.
Yeah, growing up in Middletown, leaky roofs, mom struggling with bills, nearly losing their home, he connects on that level.
But the delivery is different. The source stresses.
Totally. Marked control. He explicitly says he's not competing, just showing he understands the pain. But then adds the crucial line. His experience taught him emotion doesn't pay the bills. Uses his story to bolster his approach.
And he tackles her accusation about his voting record head on.
Argues the bills she cited were wasteful, money not reaching people. Says he voted no because he wants taxpayer money used effectively for Dallas and places like his hometown.
Then the shift to accountability.
Right. Not blaming, demanding accountability. And he circles back to that core question, like an arrow hitting the target. Billions spent in Dallas, so why are families like Maria still in unsafe housing? Where did the money actually go? Who's responsible?
He also pushes back on her criticism of the administration.
Mentions job creation, helping with rent, contrasts that with programs where people wait years for vouchers, uses that word justice sarcastically, implying the system's broken.
And the audience reaction at this point.
Murmurs again. Some clearly connecting with his story, maybe his logic, but others, waiting to see how Crockett pushes back. The source notes some head-shaking later about her lack of data.
So Vance finishes. How does Crockett respond to this? The data, the counterstory, the accountability questions.
The source describes her as motionless again, just for a second, eyes on her papers, gripping the microphone, like a boxer cornered but ready to fight back.
And her counterargument.
Comes out with anger, resolve, voice maybe trembling a bit, accuses him of talking numbers but offering no real solutions for people suffering now.
Rehashes her points about his votes cutting off hope, that those wasteful bills could mean a roof over someone's head.
Yes, and tries to flip his Ohio story. Says, okay, you represent Middletown, but you voted against a bill helping rural families. Challenges his responsibility for people in his state.
Does she have data for that claim?
That's the key thing. The source points out she didn't. She made the accusation but lacked specific figures, which weakened her point considerably.
So she doubles down on her main message. Voiceless, administration favoring the wealthy, abandoning people like Maria.
Exactly. Reasserts her core position.
How does that land with the audience?
Mixed again. Some nodding, sure, but others whispering, sensing the missing data. A senator shaking their head. The source calls one remark about Vance favoring the wealthy careless because it lacked proof, opening a fatal gap.
Okay, so Crockett makes a rebuttal. How's Vance reacting during this?
Still calm, according to the source, but eyes flashing with cold sharpness, tilting his head like he's identified the weakness, emotion over logic, no specifics, a faint smile, doesn't interrupt her.
And he makes sure people see his papers again.
Runs his hand over them, a visual reminder. I have the facts. His final approach is described as very composed, like a general moving in. Voice low, authoritative, then sharpening.
He acknowledges the stories again first.
Yes. They touch the heart. Everyone here feels that pain. Validates it one more time, but then...
Back to the core point.
But the heart alone isn't enough. Repeats that idea. Stopping at emotion builds no homes. Needs solutions, not just sad stories. He's drawing a very clear line.
And brings more data, CBO numbers this time.
Right. Only 38% of federal housing program budgets actually reach people. 62% lost to admin costs, bureaucracy, waste. He calls it a betrayal.
Then another story. Carl from Youngstown.
Yes. Carl, the older steelworker, leaky roof, needs practical help, not big promises, and he directly links him to Maria in Dallas.
How so?
Says they're no different. Both victims of failed policies. Not because there isn't enough money, but because there's no accountability for how it's spent.
And he counters her point about his votes again.
Argues he supported bills empowering local control, making funding more efficient. Says her preferred federal programs create those long waiting lists because money gets stuck.
Uses that Ohio versus Dallas comparison.
Yeah, very specific. Ohio program, 2,500 families housed, public-private funds, 1/3 the federal cost. Dallas, 5,000 plus still waiting for vouchers using the city's own data. Calls that success, sarcastically.
And then the final challenge to her.
Puts it right to her.
Yeah.
You're dodging the big question. Decades of your party's leadership in Dallas. Why are people still suffering? Do you have an answer or just more stories?
Wow. How does she react to that direct question?
The source describes it starkly, opens her mouth, nothing comes out, looks down at her papers, finds nothing. The audience feels the weight of her silence.
Vance's conclusion, then. Does he press the attack?
No, the tone shifts slightly. Sincerity, the source says. Not there to hurt her, but for Carl and Maria. They need solutions, not just emotion. And solutions start by admitting current policies failed.
His call to action.
We can do better, we must do better, but it requires truth, not tears, accountability, not accusations, action, not stories that break hearts but build no homes.
Then, the line.
The line that went everywhere. Congresswoman, you may move hearts, but moved hearts don't pay rent.
What was the immediate reaction in the room?
Silence. Then applause, notably from Republicans and neutrals, according to the source.
And Crockett's final image from the hearing.
Sitting down, eyes vacant, hands limp, shoulders slumped. Defeated. The source even quotes a Democratic senator whispering, "She didn't stand a chance." Pretty brutal. So the hearing ends, but the story doesn't. What happens next is pretty wild, according to the source.
Right, the aftermath. That Vance clip goes viral.
Instantly. Especially the moved hearts don't pay rent part. Twitter, TikTok, everywhere. Hashtag Vance Clapback trending. Millions of views, like overnight.
In the online reaction, not just his base.
No, that's what's interesting. His supporters, obviously, but also neutrals. Even some younger people praising him, saying he mixed data and personal stories well, brought truth, had heart and brains. Crockett's supporters tried to counter, but got drowned out.
How did the news cover it?
Pretty much reflected that dynamic. Fox News, resounding victory for practical thinking. Vance exposed policy weaknesses. CNN acknowledged Crockett was overwhelmed. Even more liberal outlets admitted she lacked data, though they sympathized with her message.
And the impact on Vance himself.
A real boost, according to this account. Framed as a rising star, broadening his appeal. Donors took notice, advisors saw leadership potential. He actually launched a local housing initiative based on that Ohio model he mentioned.
Making thank you letters.
Yeah, from residents in Ohio, capitalizing on the moment.
And for Crockett, what was the fallout?
Slower recovery, the source suggests. Office got calls, constituents asking why she seemed unprepared. Some felt she hadn't represented Dallas effectively, let emotion take over. Analysis called it a regrettable defeat, a lesson in preparation, political rivals sniffing around.
And beyond them. Did it shift the national conversation at all?
It sparked more discussion on poverty and housing, yeah. And the source suggests Vance kind of steered that conversation, for a while at least, towards local solutions and accountability.
So stepping back, what are the big lessons this source wants us to take away from this whole encounter?
Well, it really highlights how these debates can get bogged down in emotion or, these sort of urban-rural divides, instead of focusing on practical fixes.
Absolutely. And you just can't ignore the power of social media now, how quickly it shapes the story.
For sure. And maybe the biggest point is about preparation and logic. In politics, work, anywhere really, passion is vital, but it needs substance behind it to actually create change.
Right. Crockett's passion was clear, undeniably. But Vance came with a strategy and the data to back it up.
And that accountability piece he kept hitting, where is the money going? It's crucial when you're talking about public funds and helping people effectively.
Ultimately, the source seems to argue, whether you're in Dallas or Youngstown, people facing these struggles need action that works, not just good intentions or powerful speeches.
Yeah, the goal should be building real solutions, not just, scoring points on a political stage.
So if we distill this whole deep dive, based on what you've brought us,
Yeah.
that Vance-Crockett exchange becomes this kind of symbol. It's the emotion-first approach versus the data and strategy approach. Both matter, obviously, but in this fight, data and strategy won the day, according to the source.
And it wasn't just some isolated political spat. It really offers lessons for all of us, doesn't it? About communication, preparation, how we tackle complex problems.
Which brings it back to you, listening. Why does digging into this one moment matter for you? Well, because we're all navigating this world flooded with information, arguments, emotional appeals.
Right. And understanding these different styles, being able to weigh the emotional pull against the actual evidence, that's critical thinking in action.
Exactly. So here's something to think about, building on this. We see how powerful both emotion and data can be in grabbing attention and shaping opinions. How do you think we can make sure the best solutions, the ones that actually work, are the ones that ultimately win out, regardless of how slickly they're presented?
What's the role your critical thinking plays when you're faced with complex issues like housing and poverty, trying to sort through the noise to find what's real and what's effective?
Something to mull over. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.